Hi, good morning and afternoon, and welcome to another in the Captive Review virtual series. We gave the virtual series its official name at the start of lockdown in April 2021, and although we have been pretty keen to all start shaking hands and hugging at in-person events, our intention is to keep this format running. It's not new, but clearly has seen a huge amount of growth in its take-up across the world and companies and outlets in listening to content this way. And I think we've seen, and I think the feedback we've had is that it's proven to be hugely popular and an extremely effective way to share content. And this is the main objective from Captive Review, to deliver strong and effective content. So something else to look out for later this month, we are launching sort of the last in our main virtual events, which is Captive Connect, while we will maintain the virtual series running. So look out for that one, and please sign up for that if you can. So this brings us on to the busy hour ahead. I would like to welcome you to the second in what is a series of 3 events hosted by our sponsors today, which is Noria Software. The first episode addressed the role in IT in Captive Insurance, and this week we've put together another brilliant panel, and we'll be looking at the role of data analytics for Captive Insurers. So many of you will know, if you visited these in the past, that we use the website slido.com, which is S-L-I-D-O. And if I can ask you all to go there now, enter the hashtag Captive Review. This is where you can answer any polling questions that come from the panel, and there'll be a few at the end. And of course, you can post your questions that you may have to the panel. You can choose to answer the polls anonymously and pose your questions anonymously. But of course, we always encourage you to put your name on the questions. So if we need to get back in touch with you afterwards, we've got a way to do that. So I will now hand you straight over to our host, Ronnie Repper, who is the CEO of Noria Software, and he will introduce his panel that he's assembled for today, and then I will see you at the end for the Q&A and the polling questions. So Ronnie, I'll say goodbye for now, and over to you.
Thank you so much for your good introduction, Nick. Noria is a company focusing on helping captives digitize. So we're working with some of the biggest companies in Europe that have their own captives, and working with core end-to-end systems with policy admin, claims handling, reinsurance, accounting, government reporting, and we're also working a lot with analytics and also the interaction with their stakeholders in the opcos to help being more efficient on administrating their portfolio of objects or insured objects. Today we have a fantastic group of people who's going to talk about analytics. We have Christoph Betz from Zurich Insurance, is head of captive pricing and consulting. We have Marcel Dubac, head of centralized IP reinsurance pooling. We have Michael Bishop, COO of Livval. We have Andrew Bradley, captive board member and former group head of risk services at Nestle. And finally, the next speaker, Ole Christian Warstad, is a senior data scientist and BI expert at Noria. He will start today giving an intro to analytics with the values created to captives by superior analytics tools and data. Before me and Andrew and Ole Christian is going to have a 20-minute discussion about the situation in the captive market and how to move forward with analytics. And at the end, Marcel, Michael, and Christoph will present their offering to the market. In the end, we will have a 10 minutes Q&A, so please send in your questions during this webinar. So over to you, Ole Christian.
Thank you, Ronny, for a nice introduction. So I've been given the cruel task of getting to speak 15 minutes of a topic I would like to speak the whole day about. So let's jump straight in. So you can just go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so my agenda is actually quite simple. First, we'll take a look from the bird perspective and a look at why data analytics is important in business operations. And then we'll dive a little bit deeper and see why should a captive insurer care. What's in it for you who are listening today. Then we will look at what does a modern data analytic tool actually offer and what is different from traditional tools. Lastly, I will talk about one example project. What problems did that captive have prior and what was the outcome? Next slide, please. So today, data is everywhere. Every person, every business generates so much data every day. Many people will say that we live in the age of data or the information age, and we have been saying so for many decades. You might face data access problems, data governance, or data security issues, but the data is there. Unfortunately, not too many organizations knows what to do with all said data. If data is the new oil or the raw material of the 21st century, and better insight and decisions are the output, then analytics is the combustion engine that makes it all go forward. So I would say that the data age is over. Now is the age for analytics. I would actually argue that analytics is so crucial that if you run any type of organizations, it's sort of a mystery how you're able to run it without you putting any effort into this. But anyway, okay, it is important because it supports conversion of data into meaningful information. After all, data needs to be presented in human readable form and put into the right context. Secondly, it supports fact-based and faster decision-making based on data rather than assumptions, gut feeling, and tribal knowledge. And actually today, I would say that faster is just as important as the fact-based. And the final one I actually like to talk about the most because I think it's the most important one and not so many people talk about this. Because after all, you want your people to be productive, smart and forward-thinking, motivated, skilled, and happy. And I honestly think that a modern data analytics solution will help you achieve that. Next slide, please. So I want to briefly talk about some trends that we see in the landscape of today, and at the center of it all is the idea of data as an asset. More and more companies view data as a corporate asset and also treat it as such. Because data has three properties that makes it actually such a great asset. First of all, it is unique. Every company data is unique. If you're listening now, I want you to take 5 minutes later today and think about what data does my company have that is unique. It's something, I promise you. Second of all, it is additive. Generally, the more data you have, the more valuable it is. And also, it is non-depletive. Data is not a one-time use only asset like oil or money. You can use it again and again. Now, since data is such a great asset, we see things like data governance and data security becoming more important. And also, since data is such everywhere, knowing how to use data is of more importance as well, and this is what we call data literacy. What I mean is that you move from an IT-centric analytics operation to a business user's self-service based analytics. Further, we see that mainstream advanced analytics like forecasting, natural language processing, and so on becoming more and more user-friendly, so that more and more people can use it. And with more data, you're also then able to connect to different devices, sensors, and etc. And lastly, all of this is good for nothing if you're not able to automate something and make your life easier. So with all this, you should maybe be able to automate your ABC and shift your minds into more value-adding activities. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about there it is. What is the main value points for a captive insurer? I have listed 4 here. First of all, I'm absolutely confident there's a huge potential in just increasing your operational efficiency. Decrease the turnaround time of reports provided to management, members, etc. Doing your ABC, it should not be a painful process at all. It should be at a click of a button. Secondly, claim prevention is another quite obvious value point. Improve your risk control, but this can actually be done in 2 ways. You have the statistical and trend-based one. For instance, we're getting a lot of finger injuries down in factory hall B. Maybe we should do something about that. But the second one is actually better and has bigger potential, and that is being proactive. React to changes in your environment before a situation occurs, whether that be sensor data, weather data, political data, or whatnot. Lastly, or further, you should also be able to improve your underwriting process, make it more efficient and more accurate, and also lower your cost towards the reinsurance market. Go from this gut feeling to facts based on data. Reinsurers typically combat uncertainty with higher premiums, but better data would lower that uncertainty, and next way also lower your premium. And next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about the major differences between a classic and modern data analytic tool. First of all, many classical tools, whether that be spreadsheet or an old legacy system you have or whatever, it is quite hard to use. Generally it will involve IT or data specialist, and if you have an opportunity or decision process, that might get stuck in week to month long cycles of queryings, meetings, sending CSV and emails back and forth. Analytics is not supposed to be a patchwork of spreadsheets and emails. It is self-service ready, and you should be able to test something on the fly and investigate and go deeper and further. And also, traditional tools are usually standalone. You have to go somewhere, log into some different system, or log into a client or remote desktop, whatever, to get access. Modern tools should be embedded in your day-to-day work environment. Where you handle your claims, where you do underwriting, this should be all in same place, so that it feels natural, and this will help you immensely if you want to move towards a data-driven culture. And minutes are flying, as it always does, so we can jump to the next slide again. So one of my favorite tools is actually Excel. It's fantastic for many things, but it's also absolutely horrible for many other things. And I'm sure many of you recognize the situation on the left here. When I made this presentation, I thought I was over-exaggerating by including such an image, but then I talked to a few people and they say, oh, this is exactly how it is, maybe even worse. So someone told me that the captives is the last frontier of the insurance world when it comes to analytics. So now we're actually going to look at one captive. We took the leap from the left side here to the right side, and then we can go to the next slide. Yes, so there was quite many challenges to be solved, and all are quite common problems, really. Firstly, the reporting, both internally and externally, were manual and very time-consuming. This is because they had to do manual exports to Excel. You have to sit there and copy paste between Excels or spreadsheets, cleanse them, format them as you wanted, and etc., send them back and forth. And it resulted in a spreadsheet anarchy. Most of you answered our pre-webinar pool. You rely quite heavily on spreadsheets to manage the business. And let me be clear here, the goal is not to completely remove spreadsheets, but to make sure that the best tool available for any given business operation. In some cases that is spreadsheets, in many cases it is not. Also, another challenge was lower data quality, which is quite a common problem. And it's a little bit like chicken and egg. Do you first fix data quality before you start, or do you use this journey to actually be a driver for better data quality as well? And in this project, it was the latter. Further, you have further challenges like we're listing here, like no single truth, unclear data definitions, it was personal dependent, and so on, and the list goes on and on. So what was the outcome? We can go to the next slide. Well, this might sound very nice, but I'm not exaggerating that we got a 10 time increase in reporting efficiency, because now users no longer block their calendar for reporting week. Now everything is done clicking a button or grabbing the data they want when they want it. They're also now able to do a daily monitoring of the current situation. They log in every morning and they get all the information they need in a nice dashboard. You don't have to query their specialist and extract data and so on and so on. It's just there. Data quality, we have seen increase, and also in awareness, so the data quality will likely increase going forward. We have seen, for instance, claim prevention strategies initiated because of this. This obviously takes a little bit of time before you see some results of, but very interesting indeed. And I will also highlight that reporting now is no longer a chore, and it's something they find fun and interesting, and that is the first steps of becoming more data-driven. And let's jump to the next slide. So to wrap it all up, I have some key considerations I want you all take home with you today. First of all, make your analytic journey self-service. To describe these modern tools in one sentence, it's really just like Excel, only on steroids. It's easy to learn, and your business users have two advantages. They know the business and they know the data, so let them use it. Secondly, make it visual. I'm a nerd, so I love to read long tables, but sometimes it's very impractical. And the right data visualizations could tell me the insight I need in any second. Make it real time if you can. If you're waiting for yesterday's data to come in an email, you're doing something wrong. Put it in a context and make it actionable. And if I also going to say very generally, focus on data quality rather than quantity. You want your data to be correct and accurate. And you can go to the next slide because I'm actually finished. It went very fast. I hope you found this a little bit useful. I would say good luck if you're starting your analytic journey. And now I can give you the word back, Ronnie.
Thank you so much, Ole Christian. It was a very quick introduction to data analytics in Captives. If you want to learn more about this, you can free to contact Ole Christian or me. And especially Ole Christian can talk for days about this subject. So he has a lot to learn away. So please feel free to contact us. Next section, I welcome Andrew back to the screen. And Ole Christian, you're also welcome to join. Andrew, my brief introduction of you didn't justify your 40 years at Nestle, was that this?
This is true. 40 years, yes. It's a long time.
I guess you've learned something about data analytics and the importance of that. Please tell us about your experience with data and analytics at Nestle.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd just like to congratulate you guys on that presentation. I thought it was fantastic. It was really easy to understand and clear. Perhaps if we'd have had that level of clarity when we started our journey, we might have got further along than we did. But I think as an industry, we're not very good at using data at all. To me, we're still in the dark ages, which has always been a frustration. I think our journey started probably more than 25 years ago when we started to put together a database with the premiums, the claims, the insurers we were using, and the property and business interruption values. Obviously, at that time, it was the old clunky system, an internal one. From that, we moved to Risk Console, which was subsequently purchased by Ventive. And then about 5 years ago, we had an epiphany with Zurich, who are our principal insurer, and we worked with them on a tripartite basis using their API system and Ventive together. And I think there we came up with something that was really quite good, using data very much along the lines that you've suggested. We also overlaid that with Remetrica, with the Captive, to try and get a. So I'm throwing out these brand names, but these are the tools that we used at the time. And perhaps now you guys have got a one-stop shop for these things, but this is what we used at the time. So I think there's quite a lot of ignorance out there as to what systems are out there and what they do, because probably most insurance people probably aren't that savvy, so they probably need some assistance to guide them down what systems they really need.
So, of course, you've experienced from a big captive. Every captive have their challenges starting this journey with data and analytics. Can you tell us a little bit about your specific challenges with collecting data and starting analytics journey?
Yeah, well, as I say, we started this 25 years ago, so it was incredibly clunky at the time. So basically, we had to input all this data individually. So the big question was, who was going to input that in there? And why on earth did we need it in the first place? It's only insurance after all, so why on earth do we need it? But obviously, as you progress along this journey, you realize that you have a captive that's quite performant, and you've got a captive board that's quite demanding, and makes comparisons with the banking industry and what they can do, and how come the insurance industry isn't as advanced. It kind of challenges you to question, well, what could we do? What could we do better? So it was a challenge, but I think we've got there. When I left, there was quite a lot of automation going on. I think one of the sticking points was still the values, the BI and property values, out of Nestle's own systems. We hadn't quite worked out how to get those out of SAP. There's probably an easy way to do it, but when I left, we weren't quite there. But it's reduced the workload immensely from a local perspective and also from a head office perspective as well.
Do you think being a captive as part of a company not really that interested in insurance, it's harder to convince the organization to understand the importance of data, to convince your board of directors and such?
I think it is. I think it's somehow everybody thinks all this data just appears on your desk, and how does it get there and what do you do with it? And I think very few people really understand the insurance industry. Without being rude to the board members of captives, they probably don't understand the intricacies. They're there to have probably a higher overview and make sure the company is well managed. But I think that some of those nuts and bolts things about systems. And of course, you know, sometimes big companies, they buy a lot of systems and you get to this point, well, do you really need another system? Why can't we do it through SAP? And these are the sort of questions that you get challenged on. And then you have to sort of scratch them. Well, actually, there isn't a system. We could buy one, they could make one, but it's going to cost an absolute fortune. Actually, we can buy an off-the-shelf one for a lot cheaper and more efficient. So I think having a clear view as to what you want from your captive, what data you do need, what the insurance market needs. And I totally agree with you, Oli, that if you haven't got the data for reinsurers, especially actuaries, I mean, the prices, if you don't understand it, the price is going to go to the roof. So the data is really, really key.
Do you have any success stories you would like to tell the people about how you use data and analytics? Well,
a bit like Oli, how long have you got? I think one of the major ones was the program optimization a few years ago. We were doing a cross-class program, and there were multiple options to what retention levels, what limits we needed, what we're going to put in the captive, and the system, the Remetrica system, really helped us run that, so we could really pinpoint this is the optimum point for the captive and make sure we didn't leave any excess premium on the table. So we were making a lot better use of the captive's capital and premium and not giving more to the insurance companies. One of the sort of simpler ones, I know it sounds simple, but reconciliation of premium and claims is often a big deal within captives. And I think especially in employee benefits, where often you're under a funds held system, so third-party insurers keep those funds. And if you don't keep a close eye on this, before you know it, they haven't returned the funds to you. Over a period of years, we spotted several times and we're actually owed money. So having a good system and a good reconciliation system can drive that. And this isn't just $5 or $10. This was hundreds of thousands over a period of time. So I think that's one key thing. And with the Automation we put in place with Zurich on the API, I mean, accelerating the renewal process, the premiums, so you're not wasting time chasing up premiums. Are they in? You can see basically live where the premiums are and also the claims. And obviously, if you can get your premiums in, you're reducing the credit exposure to the captive and hopefully reducing the working capital needed. You already mentioned loss prevention. I think that's a superb one, especially if you've got a high level of claims in a particular line of business. If you can have live data or nearly live data, for example, on the marine, what sort of losses are happening to what product, what's the shipping company, what port it's going through, you can really identify where the problems are and probably try to be more proactive. And also, I think it reduces the lead time, because sometimes with insurance companies, you're not getting these reports in on a timely basis. So there's a huge lag before you can react. So I totally agree with you there with the claims is critical. I mean, if you could have these sort of systems, I think, on employee benefits, which is probably lagging behind the property and casualty, I think that would be fantastic. If, of course, you have employee benefits in your captive, which is perhaps another topic. So yeah, I think there are lots of pluses in that, but it's difficult to sell beforehand, because before you've applied these systems to your product, well, we might save this, we might save that. One of the things we tried to do was estimate the reduced work around the world. We had 80 odd countries, so we tried to say, well, so many transactions, and I mean, within the company, that I think they said it was 200 Swiss francs or 250 Swiss francs per transaction. So we tried to work out how many transactions there were, and if it was automated, well, to us there was a clear saving in man hours and the accompanying saving in monetary terms as well, to help put the business case together.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good examples here, kind of both on loss prevention, but and I think what many underestimate is the potential on efficiency. Ole Christian, you have worked with some captives. I guess you get some feedback on time saved producing reports by having live dashboards.
Yeah, I mean, yes, there's like a huge factor there by just having everything there. Really, it's just data access. It's all about. And like before, if they want to see how many claims did we get last week, you know, that took some effort to find out. It's a really simple question, and maybe it was even easier to go and look in everyone's email inbox rather than checking the database. But now, like these sort of questions, you can is like instant answer to these kind of questions, and it should be. This is, after all, 2021. This is, you know.
Yeah, we haven't touched on these predictive systems now. For example, some of these things, say for the US on workers' comp claims, or if you had loads of auto losses, you know, trying to predict the outcome or the reserving, which can be very useful, you know, for your capital and the reserving in the capital, in your captive, sorry. So, I mean, I think those are relatively well new. I think we've been talking about them for a few years, but I'm not sure how many companies actually use them. But if you had a lot of losses, I think they could be quite useful.
Yeah, I've also talked to a lot of captives, and I think what all of them says is using time to prepare reporting for the management, using days collecting data, creating presentations, and so on, instead of having a dashboard where it's available right there just by one click. So that's one of the advantages, of course, saving a lot of time for creating reports. One of the challenges for I would say all of the captives starting this journey is the competence needed to start. How is that experience from you, Andrew, with lack of competence to start the data analytics journey in your experience?
I think if you know, I'm not a technical IT person, as my colleagues, my past colleagues would say, but I think there needs to be a willingness and a realization we can't stand still with this. We need to move forward, especially if you have a complex captive. Perhaps if you have a captive just with property in it, you could probably get away with your Excel spreadsheets. But I think the more complex it is, the more lines of business you put in there, the more claims. You really need a system. I think you have to be convinced that you need it. There's to be a willingness. And I think it's probably a team effort as well between yourselves, the insurance carrier. Hopefully the brokers will buy in, but in my experience, sometimes the brokers just don't understand it. I don't think they've ever walked in our shoes. Perhaps if there's any brokers on, they can answer this question at the end. Because I think there's a total lack of interest from the broking community in helping clients along this route. And initially, it appears to be hard work, and I think you have to sit down and set targets. What is it you want with the team? Plan it out, set targets over a period of time. And I think communicate is the thing. So what's working well, what isn't. You're bound to have mistakes and errors, but I think the ultimate goal is to have something that, as you say, is a one-stop dashboard. And as long as you've got the vision to do that, I don't think you should be put off. You need to roll up your sleeves and just do it, as one famous company said.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. And you have to start somewhere. And from more experience, you get a lot more value of data analytics if the captive has in-house competence on this. So it's just either start training your people or hire somebody that has experience with the business intelligence or analytics from before, so that you can build competence and start building competence, because this goes on for years and years. Like you said, 25 years on your journey. It takes nothing happens in kind of months. It's a long journey for everybody, also in commercial insurance. So this analytics and data is a long journey before you get kind of the real values out of it. Andrew, in an ideal world where the captive has access to all the data, what would be the main values, there's potential to generate by the ideal situation?
I think you get transparency, clarity, live data, which often is lacking. It would reduce the amount of errors, because you mentioned Excel spreadsheets have their place, but if you've got this on several Excel spreadsheets and you incorporate them, the risk of errors is quite significant, and especially if you're doing actuarial studies, you can get into enormous trouble if these things are wrong. The reconciliation of premiums and claims, I think, is one of those jobs that nobody likes to do. So if you can automate that and make it easier, I think that's fantastic. Probably the bigger ones are the risk exposure and presentations to insurers or reinsurers. As you said, only the better quality data you've got, the more simpler you can present it to them to sell your business to them and get a better price, the better it is. And hopefully by doing that, you'll have a better potential to place the risk, and hopefully at a cheaper price. Perhaps not in the current market, but perhaps you're doing better than other people. I think that in a nutshell is the crux of it.
Thank you. Yes, I completely agree on that. So at the end, we have a couple of minutes left. Ole Christian, quick, any final advice for captives that is starting their journey?
Well, I mean, depends on your situation, right? Because, you know, the only thing that's prerequisite here is data. So if you have data in any form or shape, this is nothing. I mean, I often hear the excuse that we have other priorities, or it's too expensive, or we don't have skills, or we don't have the quality, or, you know, there's so many excuses out there. But this isn't, you shouldn't view this as a project anyway. This is a program. You don't have an internet project, or you don't have an Excel project in your organization. This is something, tools you do have to do your job, and this is the exact same thing. So that's the way to look at it, that this is something you develop over time, and it's a journey, and it's a tool for you to be better at your work and your organization, to perform better. That's it, really. Just like you know, this video call, or Excel, or internet, or any other tool you use.
Thank you, Christian. Good advice. Andrew, same question for you. Any final advice for captives that is starting their journey?
I think you need to be courageous, be brave. Don't be put off at the first hurdle, because it might take some time, but the benefits are certainly there. It's a journey. You need to keep sight of the potential end results. Work with the team members, your providers, to make it work. Set realistic targets, and as I said, communicate. Roll up your sleeves. But I really don't see how a captive of any size or complexity can't run efficiently without some sort of a system, data or analytics. Not in these days. So I'll rest my case.
Thank you so much for your valuable insight, Andrew and Ole Christian. Hopefully that was giving some insight into the values potential to gain by starting or going further on your analytics journey. Next on the agenda is the Zurich team with Michael, Marcel, and Christoph.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ronnie. Can someone present my slides, please? Yes. Christoph Betz, that's my name. Can you go to the next slide? I have two topics actually that I will present today. The first one is how data analytics can be used to perform captive health checks. Next slide, please. What do I mean when I speak about captive health checks? I speak actually about the question if your captive has its retention set to a healthy level, to a level that makes sense in that it's balancing out the costs. With a captive, you have two different kinds of costs. On one side, you have the opportunity costs. Everything that you put into your captive, every risk there will cost you something. For example, for the worst case years, you will need to set aside some capital. But on the other hand, you have also some risk transfer costs. The cost for everything that you don't put in your captive, you will need to handle the risk in a different way. For example, you need to put it on the traditional market, pay some premium there. So these two kinds of costs behave completely different in regards of the retention. The opportunity costs increase, the risk transfer costs decrease. So somewhere in the middle, there will be the sweet spot. That is the one that you want to find. Can you go to the next slide, please? So in order to perform these captive health checks, we have at least two different approaches. One approach is the very tailor-made one, where you look at the individual risk of a captive owner, about the individual risk that you put into the captive. And on the other hand, you can try to deduce some patterns from the market, from some captives that you think that are similar, for example, if they're in the same industry. So this is an approach that works under benchmarking, and the first one is something that we at Zurich offer in the sense of quantitative risk analysis. Can you go to my next slide, please? Yeah, so here we have now the comparison between the two approaches, and they are really quite different. The quantitative risk analysis, on one hand, as said, it's looking at the individual data from the captive owner and playing then some mathematical methods, some mathematical magic on it. It's trying via actual methods to project from the past a picture about the future risk. And based on that risk, then the optimized retention will be set. And on the other hand, with the benchmarking, you have a huge data pool from the market where you gather different information, like in what industry are the captive owners, how large are their turnover sizes, and so on, and also the retention levels. And then you try to deduce some kind of pattern there. So the philosophy or the idea behind the two approaches is also quite different. For the benchmarking, you assume that this kind of segmentation can happen and that it makes sense, that similar captive owners have a similar risk and therefore a similar retention makes sense. Whereas for the quantitative risk analysis, this works if that is not the case. If each and every risk is completely different. So at Zurich in 2016, we had a project where we tried to perform some benchmarking on our Zurich portfolio, where we were comparing different industries, and actually we were a bit so not surprised by the results, but it's told us actually that this benchmarking in a larger sense does not make sense because the risk is too individual. You cannot put it into individual number of key parameters, but that you actually need to analyze each and every risk individual for every customer. So the benchmarking can use as some first indication, but if you want to have really an optimized picture there, you need to look at the risk individual. 2 slides ahead, please, for my second part. My second part will be, thank you, about insurance and reinsurance captives. So that is laid the stage for Marcel, who will build on that. For the insurance captive, you have actually in the minimum setup just 2 different companies. You have on one side the insured company, and on the other hand you have the captive, and in between them you have the direct insurance. Of course, there can be other parties involved, like the captive management can be outsourced, or the risk can be ceded to the market, to some reinsurers, or some part of the risk, but you will always have these 2 companies in the minimum setup. Next slide, please. In contrast to this insurance captive, you have the setup of the reinsurance captive, where in the minimum setup you have at least 1 third party in addition there, the so-called fronting company or fronter. This is usually a traditional insurer on the market, for example, Zurich. And this setup now has the difference that you don't any longer have a direct contract, a direct insurance between the insured company and the captive, but you have actually a direct insurance between the insured company and the fronter. And then the fronter reinsures the risk back to the captive. So this has some advantages for the insured company and for the captive, in the sense that especially if you have a lot of policies, that you have your direct insurance for all of these policies to the insurer. And then if it's a capable fronter, they can pool all the risk, and you just need to have 1 reinsurance agreement back to the captive. So for the captive also, it has the benefit that you don't need to have an insurance license in all of the countries of the risk, but 1 reinsurance license will be sufficient, which might be easier from a regulatory perspective. But on the other hand, you need to keep other things in mind with this kind of setup. For example, due to this additional third party, you might have the requirement for some kind of collateral. With that, I like to give back. Thanks.
Thank you, Christoph. And it's now about my turn, so I would like to provide you a little bit more information about reinsurance captives, and especially what the offering from a Zurich point of view is when we have to feed reinsurance captives, as Andrew explained it, when it comes to data analytics. So I just have 1 slide, and I think it summarizes quite nice what we have already heard. So first of all, the big challenge for reinsurance captives is really to get a consistent database, let's call it that way, where all the information is in there in order to apply data analytics tool and data analytics procedures. So on the left-hand side, you can see that's what Christoph explained. So we have on top the reinsurance captive, that can be the insurance or reinsurance captive, or even a mixed solution. Whereas in a lot of cases, as Andrew explained as well, it will not be possible that the captive can have a direct insurance relationship with the local insured, and therefore so-called fronting companies, so insurance companies which front the risk. In Nestle cases, they have around 80 locations, as Andrew explained, or locations, 80 territories where they have their own risk. So therefore, our pooling offers that we would instruct local policies in those 80 territories. We will pool the information, will pool as well the risk into our Zurich pooling, and from there we retrocede it into the captive as a reinsurance solution. The big benefit or the big challenges here is, of course, to get consistent data from the fronting companies. Some of them are Zurich owned, some of them are not Zurich owned, so therefore we need to bring everything together onto 1 layer in order to feed the captive in a seamless manner, meaning that 1 premium is as well the other premium from other country. So therefore, data consistency is very important here. We can bring it back to the captive in a standardized way, structured way. We have the ability as well to transform, and in some cases this is required, to transform the data into a consistent layer and not having different data from different policies issued. In addition, a big benefit from an insurance company is that we can augment that information with any kind of other data, such as risk engineering, what we heard as well from Andrew. So they mashed up that data at the end of the day with risk engineering information, which gives you an additional database in order to apply data analytics on it. More about it we will hear later on from Michael on a live example. And of course, what Ole Christensen already told us, it's about the ability to provide information towards the captive in near time, due to the fact that our Zurich network or our fronting partners are linked or electronically linked with us, and we are electronically linked with the captive. As soon as we get aware of a claim or a claim movement or even of a premium booking or premium payment, we can immediately transfer that information towards the captive, which can afterwards apply data analytics on this kind of information we feed towards the captive on a near-time view. That's it from my end, and I hand over to Michael to explain a bit more in details in live how such an example could work.
Thank you, Marcel, and thanks for having me today. I will talk about how a global well-being platform such as LiveWell can help captive owners to link HR and risk management objectives through targeted prevention programs. Now, when it comes to life and employee benefits coverage, there's a wealth of data points available, both in claims bordereaux, in medical reports, and other sources. The key question is, how do you turn these data points into actionable insights? So in terms of business value, how can you as a captive owner use that data to improve your loss ratio and contain costs? And how can you at the same time meet your human resource department's objective to increase employee engagement and employee retention? Now, let's please move to the next slide. In terms of the LiveWell focus on corporate customers, we have a clear priority to drive prevention programs. So when we engage with our corporate customers, including captives, we start with the data that you have, right? So in terms of a first phase of our engagement, we look at the claims reports, we identify the ICD-10 codes, we identify the procedure codes that you have, and from there we define an organizational risk profiling. So that organizational risk profiling happens across 4 dimensions of health. We're looking at both the physical health dimension of your employees, we're looking at financial health, mental health, and social health in order to take a holistic approach to prevention. Based on that prevention focus and leveraging on the organizational risk profile, we define a targeted set of interventions for your organization. With that, we leverage on our toolkits coming from both digital portals, digital apps, targeted campaigns, leveraging on different variables that your employees use in order to track their physical activities. And all of this will be launched from day one with a focus on remediating the most urgent and most prevalent risks of your organization. So for example, if there is an issue with lower back pain of your employees, or if there are other musculoskeletal issues, then we can design our solutions to nudge your employees to lead a more active lifestyle, to stand up more often during the day. And similar approaches we will conduct if there is a prevalence of stress and other mental health or social health, financial health issues. As your employees engage with our solutions, we continue to track data, right? So this happens through risk assessments, prevention assessments, risk screenings. The consumption of an employee of content through our app is also a good indicator of interests and focus. And by combining the claims data with these additional data sources, we are able to refine prevention focus over time. Now, doing the right thing pays off, right? In terms of the business benefits, we normally see that engagement for employees and net promoter score a few weeks. We see with numerous examples of 15 engage with them, earn of the lifestyle-related earn based on the medical over 3 years of health benefits that company for the employees of that company. So these key health risks, for example, high blood pressure decreased from to 45, physical inactivity down from like 53% to close to 30%. This is just one example, and as you certainly know, there are numerous studies in the market which show that there is a clear financial return on investment of targeted interventions. So in summary, with LiveWell, we drive a prevention strategy for captive owners, and we enable captive owners to address the key financial objectives that they have in terms of cost containment, and also to link this back to the HR-related objectives of employee engagement and retention. And with that, back to the moderator.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was very interesting with some specific examples on how to use data in the employee benefits segment of insurance. So over to you, Nick, with some Q&A.
Sure. So thanks very much for everyone who spoke there. I think just to mirror Andrew's comment at the start, I thought the initial presentation was excellent, and the simplicity of it all paints a good picture. If only it could all be that simplistic in real life. So we're just going to launch the Slido poll. So if you have all opened the Slido tab, can you flick over to that now and just answer the first of just 2 questions? So the first one is simply asking, what is holding you back from improving your business on a data analytics basis? So they've got 4 options there. We have 1 answer so far. So is it the fact that the data is not sufficient that you have internally to analyze it? Perhaps there is a lack of budget or competence internally. It's just perhaps not a priority to the business, or simply there is currently a lack of data that you can access. So we'll just give a little while for these to kick in. Okay, we've got a few results coming through there. Yeah, I mean it's an interesting, and I'm sure we'll look at this in terms of how people are able to access the data, create the data, and have it in a format which is required to move away from inputting. Okay, so it's just slightly coming out on top is the insufficiency of data to analyze. Okay, so if we flick over then to the second question, please. So on the second question, that comes up in a sec. Right, okay, so then this one is how much experience you feel you personally have in the data analytics to go further, to get further insights. So you're either completely inexperienced, you have little or solid knowledge, or you will be rivaling the best in the business and consider yourself an expert. So if people are able just to give their view on their experience there. We've got slow uptake on this one. Oh, there they all are. Okay, so definitely overwhelming in the medium to little experience. And I think that probably is most people's experience in this whole industry. I think there's still, someone said at the start that, you know, it's the last bastion of Excel users and there aren't huge take up. Right, interesting stuff. So what we're going to do now is just head over to the questions and answers that have been, or the questions that have been posed. I know there's quite a lot that have come in. So if we can just flick to some of those and we'll run through those. We've got a few minutes. We might just run 5 minutes over on this one. So let's get kicking off. So fine, let's start with the top one. If we were to advise a firm on on data collection to best support and achieve, I think what Ole Christian said was a 10 times efficiency, what would be your advice on the data that should be collected in order to support this? Ole Christian, straight to you.
Thank you. That was a good question. Well, I mean, my advice would be that, I mean, it depends. Okay, it's one of two cases. Either you have the data in your systems, or you have at the third-party system, whether that be your brokers or your manager or your reinsurer or whatnot. Now, but when it comes to this collection of data, it's really not not that hard. But we need to make a distinction of what is a must for our day-to-day ABC report internally and externally, and what do we use for more advanced analytics. If you can just put data into 2 buckets, and then you can start to automate what you can. I mean, it's not really that hard. This is, you know, insurance have lots of industry standards and everything. So I think my advice would just be to get started, identify where the data is, and then move on.
Yeah. I mean, I think that just seems to be the constant overwhelming message, is just start collecting the data. Just running down one question there, looking at ratings. So has any of the panel seen a captive's rating affected, hopefully positively, by having strong data analytics function or a software tool that can then process that data? Is there any connection?
We used to have the hi, this is Andy, but we used to have our captive rated at one point. And I don't believe it was a topic that came up, but obviously if the data is incorrect at some point, it's going to have an impact on your company. But I don't recall this being a specific question in the audit that was undertaken by the rating agency.
Fine. Well, while we've got you, Andy, then the question was posed that, you know, some 25 years back when Nestle started to move into the collection of data, what were the main drivers? What were the conversations that happened internally that moved into that market?
Well, I hope this isn't one of my ex-colleagues sort of trying to trick me up. I see this as an anonymous question. It was the beginning of a captive journey, so we really needed the data, and it was very complex at that time because we didn't have global programs. We had individual country programs, which was incredibly difficult to manage. So really, it was the beginning of trying to manage all the information that we had, premiums, the claims, the property values assessed, etc., because it was just unmanageable, quite frankly, without a system. And I think it's still the case today. Unless you've got a system, how on earth are you going to manage your business? If you look at every company around the world, it has SAP or some similar system to manage its business. So why shouldn't captives be the same? They're businesses after all, and we should run them on a professional basis.
Yeah, and I suppose this next question, sort of whizzing through some of these, and this is, I guess, the critical answer, the critical question really: have the panel seen good risk prevention results, particularly in the non-life space, identifying drivers for fire claims and property, for example. One of the Zurich chaps.
I can answer that. We are working with the Oslo municipality that has a lot of property, and then they actually got an award some years ago on claims prevention by proactive work on claims such as fires on schools and other properties in Oslo. There have been a long-term customers on ours, and I've been working proactively with claims preventions for many years, and are probably among best in class on that.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think one of the Zurich guys mentioned at Nestle with the loss prevention, we use the system quite extensively to improve the recommendations and get the recommendations from the Zurich implemented in a more consistent way. And you can show improvement on a visual basis on the dashboard, which makes it easier for the engineers to accept. Because, you know, sometimes engineers aren't the easiest people to convince. So if you can show them, it sounds a bit rude, colored pictures, but the more you can make it easier for people to understand and why, it's simple things like that. It doesn't have to be rocket science at the end of the day.
Yeah, interesting. Just moving down a couple there then. So could the services the pooling unit provides for the reinsurance captives not be provided by any other provider? And why isn't an insurance or reinsurance company required?
Probably a question I can provide some insights. I think Andrew alluded to it, right? In theory, yes, it's probably quite technical, and you probably need quite some industry insights in order to provide such services, but probably the interest is not really there. So as Andrew said, brokers are not really interested in handling data, providing data, and so on. So that's probably still a field which is quite open for other companies to step in, apart from the insurance and reinsurance companies today.
Yeah. And then a topical question at the bottom of the screen there, directed at you, Christoph, which suggests or asks the question: do health checks still have relevance in the current hard market when there's less chance for the negotiation terms with insurers at the moment?
It's an interesting point of view. Actually, I would argue the opposite to that especially in the hardening market environment, captive health checks are more important than ever, because a captive is a very powerful tool that you have in your negotiations there. And the more risk that you put into the captive, the less risk is on the traditional market, the more premium you can save there. And in the first step, it's always useful to have an understanding what is actually good retention for your captive before you start these negotiations.
Sure. We're 3 minutes over, but we've still got a reasonable amount of people on the line, so I'm going to ask a couple more here. Andrew, for you again, the move to data analytics, was that driven by the captive board or the parent company who suggested this move?
This was the management of the captive. I mean, the captive board really didn't get into that. That was up to the management, which was us, to develop the system. And I think it's your business as such, so you have to propose, and hopefully they accept the budget that you presented to them.
Fine. And then there's 2 more questions left, so we may as well cover these 2 then as we've whizzed through these. Christoph, the first one to you, that we understand that you have experience with QRAs for reinsurance captives. Are they also of relevance for insurance captives?
So my personal view on that is that yes, they will also have relevance for insurance captives, because the principles there will be the same, that some part of the risk will go into the captive, another part of that you will need to place on the market, and you want to have a good understanding what is a good retention there. But having said that, our own experience, yes, it's true, it's for reinsurance captives, especially if they are our customers, because then we have we know the customer, we know the data already, and usually the data is also in a format that we can easier process.
Yeah, and I guess that we didn't have a broker come on earlier, by the way, and answer your question, Andrew. But if the relationship between the parties, and you know, Captive Review's been talking a lot about collaboration this year. It's such a collaborative approach having a captive, and it's quite unique, I think, in the way it operates. So much is outsourced, so much down to partnerships and share of data. So then the last question we have for the day, which is, what are the other benefits that could be achieved from the pooling model that you discussed, apart from the consistent data delivery for reinsurance captives? Marcel.
Well, I think as well, Andrew and a few others already alluded to that one. So in some cases, in certain territories, it's quite difficult to reinsure a business out from. So you need to be registered as a reinsurer, you need to have a certain capitalization, you need to have a certain rating. And therefore, as well, of course, a big reinsurance company as Zurich is one of it, has quite some benefits in that area, as we are registered in most companies as reinsurer. We have quite a big rating as well. And therefore, we can take that risk out of the country and retrocede it afterwards then into the captive. So these are a few other benefits apart from the data consistency, which can be provided by the pool.
Brilliant. Well, I think the overwhelming message is get your data in order and don't waste any further time on it, because it appears that there are very few arguments against strong data analytics, whether that is risk prevention, whether it's cost efficiencies, time, booking your diary out for reporting week, or I think you even said enjoying reporting at some point as well. Listen, I would like to thank everybody for an excellent presentation. There's a lot of you, and I thought the information was brilliant. I'd like to thank our audience for joining us religiously, as we do on these regular occurrences. We've got more seminars coming up over the next few weeks and months. But for now, from Noria Software in particular, and from Captive Review, I'd like to wish you farewell for today's event. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.